Chers auditeurs,
Dear listeners,
bonjour.
welcome in comdarchipodcast Season 3
Saison 3, dans le monde fascinant des architectes.
and in the architectural projects.
Je suis Anne-Charlotte Deponte, passionnée d'architecture et docteur des universités en histoire de l'archi.
I am one of the spokespersons of Anne-Charlotte, who is a PhD in architecture history.
Merci
Thank you
d'être avec moi aujourd'hui.
to be with us today.
Et
And
maintenant,
now,
lundi en français, place au talent.
and Wednesday, let's talk projects. In English, of course.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Dear listeners, good morning. This is Esther on behalf of Anne-Charlotte. It's good to meet you again in Season 3 of Comme d'Archi, episode 41, with a text of Lydia Blasco Yubero and Marine Oudard, runner-up of Europan 16 competition, with the Bassens-Bordeaux site in France. I'm Lydia Blasco Yubero. I'm an architect and urban planner, and I'm 35 years old. I have just been mentioned with the second prize of Europan 16 for the site of Bassens in Bordeaux in collaboration with Marine Oudard. My career started at the School of Architecture in Madrid, where I followed a technical education between the architectural and urban scale. During my fourth year, I did an exchange at the School of Architecture in Versailles in France, where I worked on territorial projects. My second semester project course was under the tutelage of Jamel Clouche, La UC, where I had to deal with a huge project site on the east bank of the city of Rio de Janeiro, where I started to think with a macro approach. Thus, I had the opportunity to travel during my studies and realize exchanges with international students from India, Japan, and Brazil, among others. These experiences allowed me to discover different interpretations and ways of approaching an urban project, depending on the urban settlement, the geography, the socio-economic context, and the history of the project site. During the last phase of the academic period, I took a break before my final project to do a personal research project in Southeast Asia. This trip was my first experimental project outside of the academic framework, making me more independent. Later, I created an architectural research magazine, Quarter Mag, and started to enter competitions beside my daily professional activity in an urban planning office. These experiences led me to set up my own structure, YAP Office, which develops projects at the crossroads of architecture, urbanism, and public space. My work as an architect is now focused on developing projects with YAP, and I continue to work with collaborators like Marine and UAPS. On the one hand, I am very interested in the dynamics of operational mutations in France today and in the game of the actors participating in the mutation of our cities. On the other hand, I have noticed that the framework of administrative procedures restricting access to orders makes it difficult to innovate in the process of project construction. Europan is a real opportunity to think about urban projects within a framework that is sensitive to contemporary thinking and changes in methods, while at the same time being in direct contact with local authorities and developers. The transformation of the port of Bassens will take place in a sensitive and environmentally resilient framework, but with a committed political vision. Thus, we have proposed to build a common framework of evolution for all, allowing to federate the different actors of the project in an innovative way that puts forward the mutualization and the short supply chains, Bassins Vivant 2050 Charter. For these reasons, I am enthusiastic about continuing to question myself on urban mutations, contextualized approaches, and the role of the different actors within an urban project. Tomorrow, the city of Bassens will join the port and the Garonne, thanks to the implementation of a virtuous system in which the regeneration of the existing comes first, and the living city makes economic programs cohabit with natural environments. It is a question of putting together the shared stakes at different scales and temporalities through a pragmatic approach. I'm Marine Oudard. I am also an architect and urban designer. If I start from the very beginning, I must admit that, as a teenager, nothing predestined me to architecture. Though I was quite creative, sensitive to drawing and painting, I was not really aware of the existence of the profession of architect. The year of the baccalaureate, my half-sister, with whom I lived, was in architecture school. She always came back with models. I started to be interested in these studies, which I believe corresponded to me rather well. I entered the School of Architecture of Paris-Belleville and became more and more passionate each year about this profession and the perspectives it could offer. After my first professional experience, I decided to continue my education, and 4 years after my first degree, I decided to continue my studies in the USA at the University of Berkeley in California, where I did a Master in Urban Design. I started my activity as an architect first through internships. The most striking one being the one I did in India. I was an exchange student in Ahmedabad, and the courses were not at all at the expected level. So I knocked on the door of a great architect that I admired a lot, Balkrishna Doshi, Pritzker 2018. I got a position as an intern, and so I stopped the school. I lost a year, but I actually gained everything because this internship really opened me up to the practice of the profession as I dreamed of it. In India, I was also able to observe and confront myself with the current challenges of Indian cities. I then started to be interested in the practice of the profession under a more urban angle, and I started to include in my reflections the problems of sustainable development. I then came back to school, finished my studies, and after graduating, I joined UAPS in Paris, an architecture and urban planning agency directed by Anne-Mie Dupuis, where I worked for 4 years. Then I traveled to the US, where I did my master's at Berkeley. After my master's degree, I worked for 1 year at SOM, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. When I came back to France in 2017, I joined Dominique Perrault Architecture Office. I am still working there, and I am now the Director of Urban Development. I have to say that since my master's degree in the USA, I developed a strong interest in the question of development of waterfront areas. Industries along waterfronts are generally being pushed further away and replaced by new post-industrial landscapes, often generic. However, these city-port interfaces are strategically located in the cities and can become great sites of experimentation. How can we allow a sustainable industrial growth along rivers in a way that does not block its access, but, on the contrary, allows a better integration into the urban fabric? What if these river industrial landscapes were part of our daily experience in cities? That is why we chose the site of Bassens, between the industrial dockland area, the Garonne River, and the town located on the slopes. We were asked to rethink the boundaries created by infrastructures while preserving the efficient connections to the docklands area. Within what we called the strip strategy, we developed a predictive landscape that physically reconnects the residential plateau and the river, but also the docklands and its hinterland. We tried to demonstrate that the port of Bordeaux could become a great model of an urban and sustainable site. With our project, the frontier that existed between the industrial zone and the inhabited plateau has disappeared. Inhabitants are invited to discover the formidable industrial heritage of the port. We are happy to have won this competition. Now it's time to develop the project and meet the actors. And of course, to continue our practice, because the beauty of our job is to be able to conceive and imagine possibilities for cities. Dear listeners, thank you for tuning in. Let's meet again next week for a new comdarchi in English. And until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Thanks to Julien Rebours, sound engineer, who is collaborating with us today. Don't forget to tune in to our previews on Instagram at comdarchipodcast. If you enjoy this podcast, don't hesitate to promote it by giving it 5 stars and a little comment on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast platform. And above all, subscribe to listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.